Hey guys, it's Terrence here with fishnetproductions.com, and welcome back to the third video in the series that I'm doing on reverb. Now, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the question of how much reverb to use, and we're going to give a really good technique to help you dial in your reverb amounts. All right, so let's get to it. All right, I should start off by saying that the question of how much reverb to use is a very subjective matter. Meaning, if you ask 30 different engineers the question of how much reverb to use, I mean, you'll probably get about 35 or 40 different answers. It's really that subjective, guys. So off top, there is no one specific amount of reverb that you should use at all times. Now, that said, it basically falls down to two different camps of the how much reverb to use thing. And the first camp is the use just enough to be sensed camp. And then the second camp is use enough to be heard, but not overbearing, and it shouldn't play a major part in your mix. So we'll deal with those two camps today in this video. Now, first, I want to give you a really simple technique to help you dial in whichever amount of reverb that you choose. So what I have here, we have the same song that we've been working on the past two videos in the reverb series. Now, this is my main reverb here. I have all of the instruments here bussed to this reverb. Now, they're all coming in the exact same amount right now. I don't have them biased in any way. So they're all sending unity gain to this reverb right here. And this is my main reverb. So what we're going to do is we're going to dial in this reverb, and we're going to start with the reverb fader all the way down so it's not getting any reverb. Now, the trick to this is what you're listening for is the staccato instruments that are in your mix. And most of the time this is going to be drums or any staccato instrument. Sometimes it's a vocal. I mean, it could be any percussion instrument, bongos or a cowbell or something like that, you know, more cowbell. But anyway, it's the staccato things in your mix. So you'll hear some of that jump out. The vocal has some staccato kind of things going on, and the drums. So what you're listening for is the snare drum. The snare drum is usually the thing that kind of jumps out at you first and kind of adds space to your mix first. So what we're going to do is dial up this fader here. And the moment we hear that snare drum start to kick in on that reverb, and you'll probably hear some of the vocal at the same time do it. But the moment we hear one or both of those elements kind of jump in, that's where we're going to stop this fader at, and that's where we're going to listen to it at. All right, so let's dial that in. Here we go. All right, so the vocal is actually what starts to kind of tell off on this reverb first. You can kind of hear it getting spacious, and those staccato notes that she's hitting on those riffs and stuff like that, it starts to get spacious around this -15 amount in the reverb. Now, really, it's actually that simple, guys. This fits the just enough to be sensed, just enough to glue the mix together a little bit, and not be heard in the mix. This is exactly what this setting of reverb is doing. So what I'll do is I'll start with it off again, and I'll play it, and then I'll turn it on, and then watch when I turn it off. You'll lose that sense. You don't really hear the reverb that much, especially if you're listening on speakers and stuff like that and you're not listening in headphones. You don't really hear the reverb that much. You just kind of sense that it's there. So watch when I turn it off, you'll seem like you're losing something from the mix. So I'll start with it off, and then I'll turn it on, and then I'll turn it off again. Here we go. All right, can you see how the reverb there, when turned off, it just kind of sucked some of the life out of the track and some of that glue? Again, it's nothing that's really heard, especially that the average listener will hear. They will just sense it. So again, that fits that camp of just enough reverb to be sensed. All right, guys, so another tip to get you into that other camp of the reverb playing more integral part of the mix and being heard a little bit more is very simple. Watch this, guys. Check it out. All you're going to do is add 5 dB to this setting that you have here. So it's really that simple, guys. Watch this. So we're at about -15 right now. So what I'll do is I'll keep it at -10 just to keep an even number here. And all we've done is add 5 dB to this reverb. Now check out what difference this is going to make to the mix. I'm going to start with it off and then I'm going to turn it on. And what you'll hear now is you can hear that reverb. It's in the mix. It's there. It can be sensed. It can be heard. It can be felt and all of that kind of stuff. But it's not overbearing. And all I did was just add 5 dB here. So check this out. I'll start with it off. All right, really simple technique there, guys. Nothing major, nothing special. You're just adding 5 dB. Now, again, 5 dB is a loose number. I'm not saying that you have to use the 5 dB. It will differ from person to person, but that's a good starting point. If you've dialed in this amount to where it can only be felt in the mix and where it's kind of gluing the track together and you can't really hear it. If you're already at that point, then simply add about 5 dB more gain in your reverb to get to that other camp of the reverb being more heard but still not being overbearing in the mix. And then you can kind of play with the numbers to see what works best for you. But generally speaking, it's around that 5 dB range. So you could take it up 5, 6, 7, or even less, 4 or 3 or something like that, whatever your particular tastes are in reverb, but it'll probably be somewhere around there to get you in each of those camps. Now, in the last video, we talked about sonic layering. So if you have a mix where you have multiple reverbs on your track, as I do here, this same technique can work. Although I do advise you doing it in the context of the mix and not do it solo. When you do it solo, you'll start to hear those reverbs a whole lot faster. And then when you turn the mix on, you probably still won't sense that it's there. So it's probably better to do it in the context of the mix. So again, it works on all of the tracks. So if you have even a mono verb on your lead vocal, you could do that here. Just turn the whole mix on, let the whole mix play, loop a section, or simply let the entire track play, and then just dial in that amount of reverb until you start to hear that spaciousness. Now, in the terms of a mono reverb, you'll start to hear that sort of front to back kind of thing because it's not a stereo thing. So you'll have to listen a little bit more carefully. And then if you have the center of your mix kind of full with multiple instruments and stuff like that, it'll probably be a little bit harder, but the same thing generally applies. So just dial in those amounts on whatever type of reverb or anything that you have on your mix like that. You can kind of dial it in that way, and then once you get it there, if you want it to be a little bit more audible, use that 4 or 5 dB setting, whatever it is that your taste is. For me, it usually works around 5 dB. So you can just dial it in from there. And it's really that simple, guys. And you got a good sounding track. You don't have an overbearing amount of reverb. It's there. It's tasteful. It works for your mix. And it's done. That's it. All right, now let's talk a little bit about how to get to that point to where you're using the right amount of reverb for your particular mix and your particular situation. Again, guys, this is a very subjective thing, and there are no hard and fast right and wrong type of concrete answers to this because it's all a matter of taste and opinion. So it's kind of hard to give you anything concrete. However, this is what I recommend doing. I recommend you get to a point to where you use a system that will work for you in most cases. Now, as I presented here, the system of dialing in the reverb until you can kind of sense it on the staccato type of instruments, and then leaving it there for one setting, and then the other camp just turning it up 5 dB. That's just a particular system that you can use to get to an end result. Now, there are plenty other systems out there, and you can discover your own, but I do recommend using some sort of system and not guessing every time you open up your reverb plugin to kind of dial in your reverb. So that's the first thing. Don't just stand around and guess and go through presets for hours and hours until you find something that you like, and then it may or may not work once you figure it out because you got it on just like one of the tracks and not all of it. It's just a lot to deal with, guys. Develop a system to where it works in each time. Now, I have other systems that I use as well, and they all deal with things like genre. So if I was doing, say, an R&B ballad mix or something like that, I would definitely be using a more generous amount of reverb and longer reverbs and stuff like that than I would be if I was doing, say, a very fast up-tempo rock track or metal track or something like that. That's just my particular taste. On up-tempo songs, I just prefer the reverbs be a little bit more short and a little bit more roomy versus the slower type, dreamy type stuff. That's usually the kind of feel I want to get for an R&B or any type of slow song. So again, that's a system. So when I open up my reverbs in a slower song, I already know, okay, I'm probably going to use longer reverbs in this one. When I have an up-tempo song that's, you know, kind of hard hitting, I already know for me and my taste that I'm going to use shorter reverbs. Now, whatever that system is for you, you develop that taste and you develop that system for yourself. And then, of course, after you develop that system, you always leave room for adjustment. It's not ever going to be the exact same way every time. This method, even that I presented in this video, is never the same way every time. Sometimes it's 5 dB, sometimes it's even 2 dB different. I mean, just depending on what's going on in the mix, it's going to be different every time. But at least you're starting out with a good base to try to get you some good results, and you're not spending hours guessing, and then you're tired, you tire your ears out, and you get tired of listening to the mix, and you get fatigued, and your mix ends up getting worse because you're spending so much time trying to dial in the right amount of reverb. So this is a simple system, guys. Just dial it in, leave it there, and finish your mix. It's really, really that simple. All right, guys. So with all of that said, I'll end the video here. Make sure you join me in the next video where we're going to be discussing convolution reverb as compared to algorithmic reverb. Now, that's a very important one because a lot of us have both of these type of reverbs, and there are some opinions out there about which are better and all of this kind of stuff. So we'll dive into that and talk about which ones to use in your mix. And listen, guys, make sure you go subscribe to the channel. Go up to the top of the page, the top right there, and hit that subscribe button. Basically, you'll get all of the notifications and everything when these videos come out right here on my YouTube channel, and you have instant access to them. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. And until then, guys, I'll see you in the next video.